I think deregulation is a big theme. The response to this is a sharp tack towards more socialism.
OpenAI saved SF. Without OpenAI's success, SF would be dead and still dying.
We will have a bubble in aerospace and defense. It will happen.
Defense tech is one of the most important categories in the world.
1 in 6 Americans who work for the US government. It is huge.
Let's hear it for Dave Friedberg. We will.
There he is.
We are on a
Speaker badge.
We're on a mission to get every single All In podcast host on the show. You're the first.
How many have you had?
You're the first. You're the first.
Might be the last. Let's see.
Yeah, might be the last. Let's see how it goes. Can you talk a little bit about Ohalo and how you interact with the government? Because it's very different than like what we normally hear with like DoD. I got to get a program of record. The government's going to buy my stuff. But it does seem like it's important for you to interface with the government in some way. What does that look like for you?
The seed industry has three regulators. It's the USDA, the EPA, and the FDA. So there are regulators, regulatory frameworks and bodies in those agencies. And it's a pretty well kind of tried and true, but there's not a lot of procurement. You're not servicing the government. So DoD is very different. There's a massive industry here that services the government, but like a lot of other industries, agriculture is regulated to some extent. Food is regulated. So there are regulators that we deal with. But we're not building a business selling into the government and supporting government action.
Are we over-regulated? Are we under-regulated?
Everything's over-regulated.
Okay.
That is a matter of fact. It's true in so many different markets that I think it's, it's starting to become apparent to a lot of these outsiders who are now stepping into the government. So what we're seeing now is a lot of attempts, and it's going to all go to court, and there's going to be years of court battles, of attempts to unwind and deregulate. So I think deregulation is a big theme. It's going to take a while. It's going to take a while to work through the courts. I'm going to go on stage. We'll see you guys.
Perfect.
Cheers.
We'll talk to you soon.
Bye, guys.
Thanks for coming
for
on.
stopping by. Are you doing more investing in companies that touch the government now?
If you look at like the hot sectors, AI still is the most,
There's some AI founders
let's
here.
say. And defense tech is the second.
Yes.
And so I think that is a structural problem. I agree more with Delian's comments about that there's not going to be many successful defense companies. I think the one thing that is a positive change and is structural and, can improve the odds of success for many founders and entrepreneurs is moving into federal revenue earlier than usual. So many companies have historically had a federal revenue arm. They may not talk about it as much publicly for a variety of reasons, but usually that comes after significant commercial success. You might see the sequencing change.
Talk about what you're talking about today. You're doing a talk with Eric Kleiman, correct?
Yeah, we just finished. Eric and I were on stage with Senator Ernst from Iowa, talking about how we can make the federal government's expenses, more streamlined using programmatic expense reporting, like that RAM offers the commercial sector. Commercial products, commercial customers of RAMP save between 5 and 15% on expenses, and the federal government probably would be able to save more. So there's 4.5 million cardholders in the federal government. There's only 2-point-something million employees.
Wow.
So there's clearly a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse. The senator cited a bunch of examples of 80,000 charges on federal credit cards at casinos. Clearly, most of those 80,000 charges are not doing official business on behalf of the federal government. So hopefully, that's the easy savings. It doesn't require cutting programs that people care about. Doesn't require this big controversial debate. But every dollar we save goes back to the American family, and they can spend it on raising a family successfully. Secondly, if we can cut 1% from the federal budget, just 1%, the Federal Reserve can lower interest rates by 1% safely and allow people to afford mortgages, allow the economy to grow without triggering inflation. So it's a very big deal to save 1 or 2%. I think a lot of people miss that.
Last question. Jensen was saying SF is back because of AI. What's your take?
Well, he stole my line.
Yeah.
I mentioned that my version of the line was slightly narrower, but he obviously can expand it. Mine was OpenAI saved SF. Without OpenAI's success, SF would be dead and still dying.
Well, thanks so much for joining. This was fantastic.
Great day.
Great to see you.
And we'll see you out on
enjoy
the
the rest of the conference.
Cheers.
How has just the mood around Silicon Valley and Washington changed over your career?
It's very different than what it was, 14 years ago. No one thought about government at all. In fact, it was considered like red flag if you cared about government. The businesses changed, and now, the most exciting businesses, a lot of them are working with the government. You have to understand how it works. So there's a lot of excitement here and also in Silicon Valley.
Last year's theme was TikTok. Have you been tracking that? Do you have a TikTok take, or have you evolved at all since last year?
Shut it down. that you can sell it and have it still not be backdoored in some way that I don't understand.
Okay.
But I also just think that we're in Trump era now.
Does it feel like it's the best time possible to be in like tech media?
I think right now what's happening in the tech press is people are trying to figure out who they are in the context of a very different culture.
In conversations that you've had, everybody sort of understands we are in an AI race. We need to win it, or do you and kind of maybe what side are you on?
I don't think anybody knows anything. We're waiting for a paradigm shift, and we're trying to also make really firm predictions about what happens after the paradigm shift.
Yeah.
And so I think that all I kind of know is that it's obviously really powerful. It's obviously improving really fast.
Yeah.
But if something is fundamentally changing society, then it's anyone's guess. I don't think that we know if it's centralizing. I don't think we know if it's going to be decentralized. I don't think we know if it's a race.
Thank you so much for coming on the
thanks
show.
for having me.
Yeah,
This
great
is great.
having
We'd
you
love to have you back.
Looking sharp. Glad you got your suit
There's
back.
more news and stuff. Do you like the framing of like reindustrialization being the focus? Is there something else we should be focused on?
Whatever the agenda is, I think the conference is focused on how tech meets Washington and like how we play nice together in the future. And I think that's the right focus. And it's, what technologies are going to matter in the future, what policies can happen that will help us get there. And I think like reindustrialization is critical, but I'm already hearing, there's a lot of talk of a lot of other things.
Should every venture capitalist be on the hunt for the Elon of energy? It feels like there is a power
Elon of
loss
energy
CEO.
might end up being Elon.
You think he's going to go into it? I mean,
I can't read his mind, but if he does, just tell me where to wire the money, Elon.
Is there any limit? I mean,
Elon
it's like
Elon is Elon.
because we're talking about like
that's kind of my
reshoring
logic.
reshoring semis, but like there has to be an upper limit to like how much industrial work he can do at some point. Or
I mean,
is that
look,
wrong?
there have been probably 10 to 20 pretty promising vision startups in the last 5-6 years.
Sure. What is your read on the new defense budget? We're hearing this $150 billion number.
I simultaneously believe that defense tech is one of the most important categories in the world.
Yeah.
But I also believe that there's going to be a very small number of winners.
Sure.
Call it in the West, this is including Europe and Israel and America. Boeing, Lockheed, they subcontract out almost everything that goes into their
So you're only getting like a
products.
slice of the market cap.
You're only getting a slice of the market cap.
Makes
And I
sense.
think these next generation companies are going to have way more vertical integration, higher margins. I actually think that we're going to see a change with how procurement happens to move away from cost plus. I think we're already starting to see that. I think there's going to be a very small number of winners that win mega hard, and then a lot of losers or companies get rolled up into the big winners.
Do you have a take on this idea of whether we're in an AI race?
I have a pretty strong opinion that the foundation model companies are going to capture way more value than people realize. I think that the operating systems are going to be the foundation models themselves. I think there's incredible kind of capex and development. Like the open source, DeepSeek and all that stuff will be great, and there'll be more open source models used in the world. I think the value capture will be lower by that than XAI, OpenAI, Anthropic, some Chinese income, etc. Get Josh Wolf on here.
That makes sense.
You guys are
Great
the
to see
best.
you.
Let's go.
Yeah. We got to do a whole
Have
deep
fun
dive
out
on
there.
that.
We'll see you back in LA.
See you.
Peace, guys.
Delian, welcome to the stream.
TBPN, Hilly Valley, TBPN, Hilly Valley.
Let's fucking go, baby.
Welcome to the show.
Let's go.
How are you
fired
feeling?
Good.
up.
Made sure to arrive here on Monday. Got a little
Yep.
accustomed to the East Coast. Realized I haven't, switched time zones in like 3 months.
It's tricky.
It's probably
harder
it's
than you
weirdly the
thought.
most brutal time.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah,
Ever.
it's tough. It's tough.
How's the reaction been? What have the most important messages been? Obviously, reindustrialization is the theme, but what else is popping up today?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's cool is like this is a week where we talked about this in a couple of prior segments around the continuing resolution.
Yep.
So this week the sort of big bill in Congress is the reconciliation.
Yes.
Transferring it from basically sort of leadership into now sort of congressional language that actually goes and gets appropriated to individual program offices.
Yes. On the $150 billion appropriation, is that an update to what we talked about, I think the first or second time you were on the show, where you said, hey, maybe there's not more money coming. Maybe it's not going to be a jump ball for a bunch of startups. Has this updated your thinking?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was sort of, the February bills were clearly like a pause. I was just like, look, we're not just going forward with what the prior administration did.
Yep.
And even though we're very late in the game on passing this year's budget, we're just going to pass a continuing resolution to put everything on pause. and then let's instead, sort of set it from the top. So it's definitely, sort of a step in the right direction. Obviously, sort of SecDef is talking about the first $1 trillion, sort of defense budget.
Yep.
Since we last chatted, also they pushed out the executive order on basically analyzing all the contracts and programs that are behind schedule and behind budget, and sort of looking at canceling those. So yeah, I think generally trending, sort of all in the right direction. But I'll always continuously reiterate of just like this doesn't mean that there needs to be like unbridled optimism. All of this is default going to Silicon Valley companies. Like a significant amount of that reconciliation package has a bunch of line items that are currently only possible to be served by traditional defense contractors and like the primes.
How do you think about kind of like forecasting government demand, and how should teams think about it?
Yeah, I think you can sort of use the reconciliation package as your sort of like combination of TAM and CAGR, right?
Yeah.
It gives you a sense of like what the current TAM is, but they're clearly indicating also what the CAGR of that is going to be. And so I think in some ways for defense startups and startups in general, to go back to like the Peter Thiel's 0 to 1 philosophy, you want to monopolize a small market first and then grow from there over time. And so in some ways, if they were forced to spend $5 billion in a single year, probably inefficiently and probably zero chance that it happens to be one provider. There's no way that any startup, no matter how great you are, is ready to spend $5 billion in a single year. And so by default, it's super disparate. There'll be a bunch of different players, which you might not necessarily want 15 shipbuilding players. Like, probably what's best for the country is like probably not one, probably not 15, but probably like 3 that are constantly competing against one another. Generally, bull for defense tech.
That's great.
That there's a whole set of, sort of budgets now that in particular are very uniquely tech forward, right? So if you look at like the concept of like unmanned fighter jets and unmanned surface vessels, this reconciliation package is by far the biggest budgets that you've ever seen for those types of activities. And obviously that is a particular area. There's some in there that's like ammunitions and like, Army barracks, like, refurbishment and things like that. I'm not sure that like Anduril's great at like Army barracks refurbishment.
Sure.
But like, I think they'll probably be pretty great at some of this like unmanned surface vessel sort of type activity. Totally. And so it's really exciting to see like some of these TAMs be pretty big that are very clearly only servable by like, this next generation of tech companies.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Yeah, this is awesome.
I
really
said
great to see.
this is the highest density of absolute killers that I've set foot in a long time.
Yeah.
So
I'm glad after I saw your guys' YC thing, I just like texted Coogan afterwards and I was like,
Let's do it.
This at Hill and Valley, it's going to be sick.
fantastic.
We pulled
Yeah,
it
we
off.
pulled it
It was
in.
Here we are.
amazing.
Here we are.
Good to see you
man,
boys.
This is great.
We'll see you out on the
Everything.
floor.
We'll talk to you
We
soon.
don't need
It
any
was
more
great.
part-time podcasters.
Yeah. Ryan Peterson, welcome back to the show. Third time.
Treated like cattle.
Yes, I know.
yeah.
It's really rough.
Sorry about that.
You're in a very interesting business. What does a great outcome here look like in the next couple of years? What's your stump speech right now?
A couple of years. What we've seen in our data is a 60% decline in freight from China to the U.S.
Yeah. Can you unpack that? I heard something about like the freight rates are actually high because their ships aren't even moving. Is that right?
No, rates are pretty reasonably low right
Okay.
now. There's a risk of it going higher. I think it'll be a first-class problem if they
Sure.
undo the tariffs and a lot of volume comes through.
Then it goes high.
Then you'll see this spike.
But if you're willing to pay the tariff, you have a really high margin, you can get stuff out of China right now.
yeah, it's a little bit. So you've had a 60% decline in bookings of ocean freight from China to the U.S.
Okay.
That's resulted in a 25% decline of sailings.
Is there any sense of optimism on the ground?
There's a sentiment that the tariff with China at 145 is not sustainable. It's not where they meant to be, not where they want to be.
Sure.
That it will come down.
Yep.
Sean Frank had an interesting policy, recommendation or idea, which was like basically take what I would have to pay in tariffs and make me invest it here in the U.S.
They announced today that they would allow you to expense 100% of CapEx if you're building a factory. This could be really big, first year straight line depreciate the entire amount
thing.
of the
Wow.
build out. So, more policies like that might get the industrialization.
Thank you so much for coming
guys.
on. This was fantastic.
Thank
you so much.
I want the tariffs to end so you can get a good night's sleep.
Yes. Welcome to the stream. It's here for Eric Glyman. Has your panel already happened, or is it coming up?
It happened this morning.
It happened this morning.
It was a ton of fun.
We were locked into the stream.
Yeah.
What is the pitch, and how did it go?
For private companies, startups, whatever it is for a lot of years,
Yeah.
getting more from every dollar spent is
Yep.
just obvious,
Yeah,
right? A dollar saved
Yep.
is not a dollar earned. The average
Yep.
American business has an 8.5% profit margin, so a dollar saved is 12 earned.
Yep.
The government is thinking about this. Of
Yep.
course, there's a lot of tax dollars in, but the deficit is growing every year, and so whether it's Doge and the folks there or other parts of the government, everyone is starting to think about how can we start to apply modern tools to drive savings.
Yeah.
And in many ways, ramp is at the forefront of it. I don't think people realize the scale of how large the U.S. government is.
Yeah.
Between federal, state, local education.
Yeah.
One of the most mind-blowing stats that I learned is 1 in 6 Americans who work for the U.S. government.
That's wild.
It is huge. People would find it ludicrous if our Air Force was flying with propeller planes in a jet age.
Yeah.
And yet that's kind of what's happening with the tools we use to, make expenses, do our accounting, make sure attestation is clear. These are old, disparate systems that I think private industry has adopted tools like Ramp leading the forefront of it's integrated. Your expense policy drives what you can buy. It does your expense report, your accounting. And so however it goes, I just think countries can be a lot better off using modern technology. When you look into these things that you think should be trivial are very hard when you have old systems like this. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, we'll let you go and we'll bring
This is great.
We have Josh Wolf, the man himself.
What's going on?
Good to see you.
Great to see you. What was your kind of DC playbook? What advice would you give to your portfolio maybe 5 years ago, and how is it different than today?
5 years ago, I think you were working with a lot of lobbyists to try to get meetings on the Hill. You'd be lucky if you can get a senator. You were mostly getting congressmen or staffers, if that. Today, I think everybody wants to be in the conversation because they don't want to be ignorant. You have a lot more alliances between red and blue, Republicans and Dems on things like shared adversaries. China, that's a question which everybody converged upon. So American competitiveness, thinking about the scientists, the engineering. People are going to debate some of the policy stuff. Should we be cutting science funding? Should we be partnering with South Korea or Japan or UK and these kinds of things? But everybody wants to be in the conversation, so your access today is evidenced by this conference. I mean, what Jacob and Delian and Christian have done here is just really amazing because it started as this napkin sketch. It became a crowd. Now the crowd has become sort of a movement, but the caliber of the people that you're getting is both extraordinary. And the politicians sort of keep getting older, but the people that are doing the tech companies that we're looking to fund keep getting younger. And I think that's a beautiful thing. The best entrepreneurs, frankly, are the people that we backed at Anderl. And we've done 2 people that have vested and, sort of with blessing have gone and left and started their own company. And so being able to find these fountains of talent that have seen success, have seen rapid scaling, have seen valuations, they understand the venture game, they can raise money, they can attract technologists, they can in-license IP or develop it themselves. Those are the people that you can back time and time again. So I think we have a decade-long run of amazing talent in this ecosystem that isn't going to be just Silicon Valley, right? It's going to be SoCal. And it's going to be other parts of the U.S., down in Texas and maybe even Florida.
What's your advice to kind of early stage founders that are seeing the world change and trying to kind of navigate and see opportunities? How do you help founders kind of understand market timing when there's so much in flux?
The honest answer, a lot of it is luck.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I always say that there's a 5-year psychological bias that you want to be invested today where you should have been 5 years ago.
How do you think about how quickly information spreads today? If a decade ago, you'd have a category that could be underhyped for a long time. Now somebody enters a space, they release a video, and suddenly a bunch of new people are pouring in. Where are you looking at this point, just besides your own network, for the next founder that you're going to fund?
So I have this as a flaw in my personality, which is, I want to know everything that everybody else is talking about, but then I need to understand what's the white space, like Sherlock Holmes, what's the curious incident in the dog in the night, the thing that people aren't talking about. So I'll give you one because it's unsexy, and I've talked about it publicly. Maintenance. Maintenance is the most boring thing you can think about, but here's the simple logic that I had. It wasn't reactive to a quarter or even a year. It was the basic idea that the cost of capital is going to rise. Okay, if the cost of capital rises, and you're not funding low interest rate stuff. That's the kind of thinking at Lux that we're thinking about orthogonally. Everybody else might be tacking here, but how do you find something, start making some bets, and then in 3, 4, 5 years, everybody wants to be in that space.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much for joining. Another third timer on the show, Augustus.
How's it going, Doug?
Welcome. How you doing?
First off, the hair is looking amazing.
Thank you for the weather. It's fantastic. Not too hot, not too cold. I feel like you pulled some strings.
The pleasure's mine.
How much is water scarcity a factor in reindustrialization? What kind of conversations have you been having here at the event?
A lot of people intuitively talk about how energy is this fundamental primitive in all industrialization. So are critical minerals. So is now intelligence and human capital. Water, because nobody has ever had any ability to work on it and provide new supply, has kind of just been this assumed limitation. It's going to be necessary to produce more should we want to build up this industrial base, should we want to increase ag production. Particularly the TSMC plant in Arizona, nobody knows where the water for that's going to come from.
Really?
Yeah. Like you need it to come from either the mountains in Flagstaff or the Colorado River, and the only way to get it there's cloud seeding.
The first time we met, you talked about China planting trees and terraforming the Gobi Desert. Is there any world where that becomes like a national policy, or do you still need to go state by state?
No, dude. So Secretary Burgum gave these great remarks this morning about how all of our federal lands should be considered a national asset.
We appreciate you stopping by.
Thanks for coming
Thanks
on.
so much.
Great
This is
to see
great.
you.
Always good to have you on.